Hello, it's Barbara here. Just to say, I'm not sitting in a field of sheep much as I'd like to. This is a far better view for you than my very messy study. And I'm here to record our sermon for this week. And the Bible reading, the Gospel reading that I'm focusing on is from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 22, beginning at the 34th verse. When the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. And one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest? Jesus said to him, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbour as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. The Bible reading goes on to the end of that chapter, but I'm today just going to focus on those two verses 5 and 7. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. That's relatively easy to say, a lot less easy to follow. And what does it mean in our lives today? This answer to this question is what Jesus gave to one of those difficult Pharisees that were always challenging him. And it was a lawyer who asked the question, which commandment in the law is the greatest? And I suppose, being a lawyer, he asked Jesus this awkward question to try and trip him up and confuse him, a bit like a barrister in court today, cross-questioning someone on trial. And the answer that Jesus gave him was simply all about love, loving God and loving your neighbour. But as we know, there are many different sorts of love. We can all think of many examples, some sentimental and easy, others extremely demanding. I expect, like me, if you are a parent or a carer, you've maybe said when going through difficult times with children, I may not like you, but I'll always love you. And often we have to use and give what I might call tough love. Jesus talked about a God who loved us. An example he gave was of the father of the prodigal son loving his errant offspring. A completely unselfish, self-giving, non-judgmental love. Then Jesus showed this sort of love in action by laying down his life for his friends, his followers, his disciples, and for each one of us. And this is what convinced the disciples that Jesus was the one with this sacrificial quality of his love. And that love is far gutsier than the sentimental gushing sort, the sort of love that starts with a loving God in response to his love for each one of us. And we're coming now into the time of the year as we get to the end of October and November, when in our churches and beyond, we have services and activities to focus on love and what it means to us as Christians. We've just had our wedding preparation morning when we invited couples who are getting married in 2024 to come and discuss what a Christian marriage is all about and how we can help bring God's love to them as we help them celebrate their love for each other. And we can do this by the love and the welcome that we give them in our congregations. And later today, or this end of October Sunday, we'll be holding our remembering services, when we'll be offering the opportunity for people to remember those whom they love and can't see anymore. So they have some space before God to remember the people we've loved, and in a tangible way to light a candle if that's what they wish to do. And of course, we've got remembrance coming up as well, where we can have the opportunity to focus on the sacrificial love of those who gave their lives so that we might live in peace. John 15, verse 13. Greater love hath no man that he lays down his life for his friends. And that's what we are remembering on Remembrance Day. Those people who gave their lives, who gave their health, and who gave their mental health as well. And all of these are far different than the sentimental or even meaningless ways that we talk about love. My daughter often says, I love chocolate. Somebody said to me the other day, I love watching Strictly. But that's a different sort of love. And we need to look about the love that Jesus taught us about loving our neighbours as ourselves. And it's relatively easy to buy a few extra groceries for the food bank, to buy a copy of The Big Issue, or put some money, if we can afford it, in a charity pot, and then feel very good about ourselves. It's much, much harder to bring God's love to those who need it most, either practically or spiritually. Just a few examples that came to my mind. There was a newsreel, an old newsreel, on the TV a few nights ago, showing Princess Diana hugging a man with AIDS, long before we knew it was safe. I also recalled a situation I was in many years ago when I was called out to hospital to a female farmer who was close to death. This woman had been bedridden and, in inverted commas, cared for by her son, who had learning difficulties. I went into the room where she was, and her body was literally stinking and was covered in ulcers. The nurses and I cleaned her up as much as we could and covered her with some nice body cream. And I liken that to Mary Magdalene, who did that when she anointed Jesus with the very expensive oil and was told off and criticised by the disciples for spending so much money on it. Sacrifice of love to Jesus by her. Going over and above what was needed, much more than token love. And we can all think of sacrificial examples of love in our own lives. And maybe as we come towards the season of Advent, it might be an appropriate time to look how we can make that verse, love your neighbour as yourself, more meaningful in our own lives. We do know it's relatively easy to be kind to that nice neighbour that lives in our village, who maybe just needs a lift to the shops now and again. But how easy might it be to love, care for, and to pray for a neighbour that we've never met? Our neighbours are worldwide. A paedophile in Onley prison. Somebody who's hurt us or one of our family very badly. Somebody who's robbed us. Those soldiers in Israel cutting the lives of little children and people who have got nothing to do with the conflict, cutting their lives short. And that kind of love and caring can only begin to happen when we love God. And in response to his love for us, we can then begin to love those difficult to love people. And it's really important to remember that as Christians, we should take that sacrificial love out of the church doors when we leave. And not just within our services, but in our day-to-day lives. It can take all of our hearts, all of our minds, and all of our souls to work out what that means in practice to each one of us. But the starting point is loving God and what he can bring to each one of us. Through that love, we can help other people. And I'm reminded as I finish for the words of that hymn, which many of you will be familiar with. A new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you. By this shall all know that you are my disciples, if you love one another, and by this you will all know that you are my disciples. So it's all through love of God that we can help ourselves to help other people. Amen.